NFTs in cryptocurrency are a dividing subject amongst game developers. In the indie community, you'll see uproar over game engines accepting funding from crypto-based studios, game developers making NFT-based games, but at the same time, there's an enormous amount of effort going into developing games around this technology. Most recently, Dr. Disrespect via his new studio, Midnight Society. They have announced that his game studio will be offering early access via the purchase of an NFT. At this point, the metaverse has become a household term, and reports of big money being spent by certain individuals to acquire in-game items and plots of land are headline news. Surely enough developers believe in this new tech to create such models, or is capitalism to blame? Stick with me and we'll find out. So before we start, maybe we should quickly define the blockchain and NFTs for anyone that has heard of it but isn't too sure. We'll just go over a basic idea. So blockchain is a chain of blocks that contains a record and information linked together using cryptography. Each block contains a cryptographic hash of the previous block, a timestamp, and transaction data. The ledger is distributed amongst a peer-to-peer network, making them incredibly difficult to alter and transparent to all users. NFT stands for non-fungible token. Not only can a blockchain be used for cryptocurrency, but they can also hold data and track assets, which can be tangible, like, say, a ticket to an event or even a house, and they can be intangible, like a contract, patents, digital art, or even in-game items. So you may have seen the Bored Apes or Gary V's VFriends. The point is that you can use the blockchain to store information about things, and those things can be almost anything. In the case of a Bored Ape, it's just an image used to show off wealth, I guess. And Gary V's is an image but also a ticket to a conference, which is interesting because the holder of that NFT gets access to the conference. So the market can decide the value of access to that conference. Although I suspect that that's not the driving force for the price. So you get the idea where people are trying to use NFTs to give people another way to access their products. In theory, you could do the same thing with games, and Midnight Society is going to try to do exactly this. Other people have also tried to do this to varying degrees of success, but the question is, should this be the future? I should probably tell you a bit about my own relationship with all of these ideas. I am a game developer on the side, but I actually work in finance. I have a degree in commerce with a major in accounting and economics. And when I was studying back in 2011, cryptocurrency and blockchain technology was only just starting to gain a spotlight. I remember in a discussion during a macroeconomics class where the idea of a decentralized currency and blockchain technology were discussed. The idea at the time, at least at my school, was that the blockchain would be really useful and had potential to be utilized, but the currency side of things would probably be shut down in a matter of time, since it was mostly used for illegal transactions and can't be controlled by the government. So control of currency is pretty fundamental for managing an economy, and I would love to hear what my professors would say now, considering the use of crypto has shifted away from currency to an investment product. Naturally, with this frame, even though I was aware of Bitcoin at an early enough stage, I never really bought any because any day now the government will seize control, and if you think its primary use is currency anyway, then holding it doesn't really make much sense either. So the economists and I were wrong in 2011, but these days cryptocurrency, contrary to its name, is most often used as an investment instrument, not a currency. It's not really practical as one, and the blockchain is becoming a more useful tool with things like smart contracts. Everyone is talking about Web3, and the Zuck won't stop yapping on about the metaverse. And maybe I'm just a little bit out of touch, but I struggle to see the point. Like, did we forget that Second Life was a thing? And what about Roblox? It seems to exist in a world without blockchain, and people are still spending enormous sums of money, whether it's good or bad, just to buy an in-game item and the currency that they use to transact those. Sure, it could be done using cryptocurrency and the blockchain to distribute in-game currency and track transactions for in-game items. It could, but it's not at all necessary for a game like Roblox. The Sandbox or Horizon Worlds, sure, in-game items could be an NFT, but it's not going to change what the game is at its core. And I think what a lot of people forget when thinking about the blockchain's role in the digital space is what gives things value. Why is a Bored Ape valuable? And why can't I afford a house? And what's going on with the price of fuel? Everything that we buy has a value. Fuel and houses are expensive because I need them to live. And they're becoming more and more hard to find. I have a need, and they're scarce. Or in other words, demand outweighs supply. And NFT has no use most of the time. We don't have any need, but the demand also far outweighs the supply. The blockchain gives people a way to track the quantity of a digital product like a Bored Ape and create an artificial scarcity. If it wasn't for the blockchain, these items would have an infinite quantity, so the supply and demand model couldn't be applied. It's a ledger, it's not magic. It doesn't inherently make things valuable because they're suddenly on it. It's because the people who made the NFT found a way to get people to care about the product enough to want it. We have a way of assigning and tracking supply and ownership of it. That's it. The value of an NFT comes from people's desire to own something that no one else has. Or because they think other people will want it in the future. Because there's a lot, and I mean a lot of speculation that goes into these NFTs, where even more demand is being thrown in because people think other people will want them in the future. And this is where a lot of my criticism comes from. NFTs, cryptocurrency, and the blockchain are fine. They're not even that revolutionary. Like I said before, it's a ledger, and ledgers are boring. Trust me, I deal with them every day. They're more like a jump from the horse and carriage to the car than the invention of the wheel. We can still get to A to B, only it's not really faster, and now instead of my bank and potentially my government knowing all my purchase transactions, everyone does. If regular currency suddenly died out and cryptocurrency was the dominant form of exchange, our day-to-day life wouldn't really change except for the way transactions happen when you swipe your card. Oh, and Joe Blow down the street could see my spending if he knew my wallet address. It's all very under the hood, and while I really like some of the ideas, I fail to see the reason for the increase in value except for the speculation aspect combined with the artificial scarcity. The fact that it even tries to call itself a currency these days is laughable. The dollar does not and should not appreciate in value like most people want crypto to. You actually want the opposite in the real world economy. You want people to have an incentive to spend money. It's what drives the economy. There's little point to hold cash these days. Either you spend it, invest it, or it's dead money. Could you imagine if the primary goal of money was to hodl it all? Good luck eating, bro. Now, all of this might sound like I'm against the use of crypto or NFTs in video games, and to an extent that's mostly true, but not in the way that you might think. These days, crypto is awash with rug pulls, and companies seem all too eager to mint their brand and sell it off to the highest bidder for a bit of quick cash. The greed has driven the consumption of these products to an unprecedented level, and people have attached the idea that it's all some kind of get-rich-quick scheme. It fuels a mania of spending like capitalism has never seen before. But I think the blockchain could have a place in game development, just not at the center. So, let's look at some of the current ways that developers have tried to use the blockchain in their game. Axi Infinity is a self-proclaimed play-to-earn Pokemon-style card battler that allows players to collect Axis as pets, battle, breed, collect, raise, and build kingdoms for their Axis. On paper, when I first read about this without going in depth, it seemed fine in principle, right? The items and the cards you get can be sold on the blockchain as an NFT. Those same Axes can be used to battle. Naturally, more powerful Axes fetch a higher price, so players are incentivized to pay more to get ahead, which in principle is not all that different from a regular gacha game, which are also exploitative. Except you can pull your money out by selling your Axes and the currency that goes along with it. But the more I started reading about it, the more it started to seem a little bit more predatory than a regular gacha game. There's all this talk about managers and scholars that sponsor new players, and it's got a very multi-level marketing attitude about bringing in new players, and this is mostly due to the fact that the economy of the game relies on new players purchasing Axes that are bred in game. Of course, if there are fewer new players, then the price of the Axies will fall. Also, if the player base starts to dip, then I imagine the economy will be in for a bit of a freefall. When I started looking at the buy-in price that some people were talking about, I was astounded. It looks like a bare minimum spend of 60 USD, which on the surface seems fine. Regular games cost at least that much, but I also read that you can spend upwards of 1,000 USD to get a good team. And while that sets alarm bells off in my head that this is a trap, the obvious problem I see with this game is that it depends on new players coming in to buy more Axies. You can tell that they're trying to attract people with the idea that you can make money, which if that's your main draw for your game, then you've got a problem. From what I can tell from their Reddit, the feeling amongst most players is that unless you put a lot of money in, you're going to have a hard time competing. It makes total sense from a business perspective, so you better pony up if you want to win. You've got to spend money to make money, which, by the way, is a total lie, and if someone ever tells you that to try and convince you to invest in something, it's probably a trap. So, is this any different from any other gacha game? Probably not. It's going to draw additional criticism because it's promising money to players, which is really wrong. Frankly, this is the most disgusting thing about these kind of games. Fundamentally, they aren't that different from a regular pay-to-win gacha game. Really, they apply the same principles, but the major draw-in for the game, and many others, is that you can make money. You can be a millionaire just by playing this game. The only redeeming factor is that at very least you can get your money out if you do manage to get your return on initial investment. But it is just gambling at the end of the day. Then there's the other, less insidious kind of NFT game. One where you don't need to spend money or anything crazy like that. This is simply skins or cosmetic items as NFTs. We attach the idea of ownership to these items. Not unlike Steam, in fact, probably better because if you happen to get an item that's worth something, you can actually turn it into real money, instead of games or items in Steam's case. From my perspective, if it were at all possible to tear out the idea of everything on the blockchain needs to be ever appreciating in value, I think that it might help in the case for game items as NFTs. An example I can think of in my own experience is that I used to be a big time World of Warcraft player. Played maybe 5 hours a day during university time, probably more, and I got some pretty cool shit, stuff you can't even get anymore, or is incredibly rare, and I asked myself, would the ability to sell those items on a free market for actual cash enhance or make my experience any better? Would I have hodled those items to be able to cash out when I finally kicked the habit and stopped playing? Or handed over my raptor that I may or may have not stolen from my brother-in-law? Still feel bad about that. Although, even in games like this, where it's not really meant to be play to earn, people will still try. Hell, if WoW allowed me to sell my cosmetics for real money back in the day, I would have been running Zul'Gurub a heck of a lot more even after I got my mount. Seriously, I would have tried to turn that into my main job. I don't know, like I can't really see how, you know, in my case, historically, if that would have made things better. I think probably would have made my addiction worse. You know. Then finally, we have the third form of blockchain games, and that is games as NFTs, which is where the access of the game is sold as an NFT on the blockchain. The most recent and notable of these is Dr. Disrespect, who is selling early access to his game via the blockchain. There is also a number of other perks, but notably, they don't affect the actual gameplay at all. It's just a way to support the game. And I think out of all the iterations that we've looked at, this is probably the one I'm going to look at most favorably, since there's no incentive to turn playing the game into some kind of grind for money. There's still an underlying issue that people look at NFTs as some kind of investment, which they really shouldn't. I'll be watching Dr. Disrespect's launch to see what happens to these access passes if people try and make money from them. Their price after the initial hype, if they sell out and there's still demand, maybe the price will inflate, or if the game is bad, then obviously we're going to expect the price to tank. And it's going to be very interesting to watch. I think I like this idea the most. The game is actually free to play, so why would you buy the NFT? Well, there's early access, of course, but post-launch they're offering the NFT holder to be able to vote on features of the game and access to special events. So, we've seen a lot of backlash on this, but I'm actually going to defend Dr. Disrespect here and his studio Midnight Society. And what I will say is, take the NFT out of the Access Pass. What's actually wrong with it? Nothing really, it's totally benign. In fact, if any other game was offering early access, plus events, and voting rights on features, I think the community would be over the moon. And that's a lot for $50 as well. All the NFT does is give you a way to transfer this to someone else. I think there could be more passes. 10,000 sounds like a lot, but there's a big following on this game, and maybe there's a technical reason, but I doubt it. Also, if you buy on launch for $50, then the risk of the game never launching is pretty low. This happens all the time on early access games on Steam, but if the price of the NFT balloons to crazy high levels, then obviously your risk of the game collapsing and never releasing are infinitely greater. They have a limit of 1, which is really good. It'll stop people from trying to buy up all the tokens to control development or drive the price up. And there's also a 30-day lockdown period, so that should slow people down when trying to manipulate this. Personally, I think this is the most valid use of the NFT there could be, if there was one. There is a legitimate value to be had here, and it's not being sold for an unrealistic price, and there are protections in place to slow down the inflation of that price, because people are batshit insane. So I will be watching this closely to see how it pans out. I think the only other thing that I would like to add to this is these limits on quantity are what really drive me crazy with these NFTs. It could be infinite, or it could be effectively infinite. You know, you have a supply that vastly exceeds what people actually want, but they're intentionally, or I don't know, in this case, maybe 10,000 is enough, but you know, people intentionally limit the supply to, you know, create hype, limit the access, and it's kind of gross, really, at the end of the day, don't you think? Like I said at the top of this video, the NFT and the blockchain is not some magical, revolutionary thing. It's just a ledger, a list of transactions. Dr. Disrespect could do this Game Pass without putting it on the blockchain. People do application betas and early access all the time, but transferring it would be impossible. That's its only redeeming factor, and that's all that changes with this. And I think what really needs to change is the marketing and ideology around what NFT and crypto bring to the table. It is a convenient way to transfer digital goods, and we need to let go of this to the moon attitude and stop sinking ridiculous amounts of money speculating on monkeys or Axis or whatever else it is. If we can do that and probably fix those energy requirements, I think it would be the best case scenario. Would I ever do a blockchain game myself? No, probably not right now, not in the current climate. I think the market attitude is wrong, both around people who support it and are against it, and the digital space needs regulation. And I know that's an incredibly controversial thing to say, but there's a lot of money and a lot of risk and a lot of scammers going around that need to be held accountable. NFTs don't give something value. Something should give value to the NFT. And I think its best use in game development is either with cosmetics or the game itself as an NFT. Play to earn is pretty disgusting and might as well be gambling, and it should be regulated as such. And if you disagree with that and think that the blockchain and crypto can become the dominant form of exchange without government control or oversight, then I would suggest you get a reality check, because there's no way Ethereum or Bitcoin could ever be used in that way without it. Also, I find it laughable that you could think that the price would stay so high if it was, because it would be economically impossible. But that's a whole other video, and it's economics, not game dev. I'm Isaac, I am Chef Dev, and I'll see you next time.